I want you to think back for a second to the time when you were a student. And I want you to think about the kinds of lessons that you remember. The ones that were memorable enough that they actually stuck in your mind. Think about what made those lessons memorable. Why did you remember them after all of these years? Maybe it was an activity where you got to do some things together with your friends. Maybe it was something that was funny and got a laugh out of your classmates. Maybe it was just something that was tied to your interests and you really, really loved it. For one reason or another, a lot of these lessons sometimes stick in our brains and can last with us our entire lives. There's just something about these engaging lessons. And whenever they happen, we want to hang on to them. It's almost like we want to catch that lightning in a bottle and be able to do it again. There are lots of ways that we can engage our students. And whenever we use those engagement strategies really well, learning is almost like magic. It's like it's not even work. It's just this journey that we get to go on with our students. And so how can we replicate that? How can we use some of those strategies and get the most out of our lessons every single time? Well, my name's Matt Miller. I wrote a book called Tech Like a Pirate that's all about using the classroom technology that we have to create memorable learning, to create those unforgettable experiences. And there are lots of ways that technology can help us do that and help engage our students. Whenever we get it right, we have our students' full attention and their learning is working at full capacity. But whenever we don't get it right, it's almost like there's this switch. I really believe that we all have this switch, like an attention switch. And whenever things don't go quite right, that switch gets turned off in our students. That attention switch, it's turned off. And whenever that switch is off, it's almost like students are someplace else. They might as well be someplace else because there's not a whole lot of learning going on. But whenever that attention switch is on, we have their full undivided attention. They're totally focused. And so the question is, how can we get our students to flip that attention switch on, to be able to turn it on from the beginning of class? And if they do get that attention switch turned off, how can we get them to flip it from off to back on? I think there are lots of ways to be able to engage students in the classroom like that. And of course, our technology can help us do that. And so in this series of videos, that's really what we're going to be talking about. What are some of the ways that we can capture that attention to make learning memorable, to create some of those unforgettable experiences so that students are able to retain all of that information, to learn, to actually enjoy what they're doing in the classroom, and to be able to move forward faster. When we look at student engagement, I think sometimes people think of it as fluffy stuff. It's not going to impact student learning. It's not going to help them for the long term. Sometimes I think we look at it like, students need to get down to work and they need to, just sit down at their desks and get focused and do the work. And there's something to that. But the reality is that there is a large body of research that speaks to the fact that engaging students, that making learning memorable really works. And it works in ways that some of that put your head down and just do the work type of stuff. It works in some ways that kind of learning doesn't. And so I wanted to share with you, as we're getting into this topic of student engagement and capturing students' attention, I wanted to share with you a little bit of the research that powers this kind of thing. For instance, in the book, The Happiness Advantage, author Sean Achor does all of this research around the idea of our emotional state as we get into our work. And this goes for adults, it goes for students in the classroom. And what he's found is that we are 31% more productive when our emotional state is not at negative. It's not at neutral. It's when that emotional state, when the needle kind of goes all the way over to positive. When our overall emotional state is at positive, we're 31% more productive, according to his research. And why is that? I think a big part of it has to do with that our brains don't perceive a threat. They talk about how whenever there is some sort of threat to our, that we perceive. So, that could potentially, of course, be like a physical threat, like there's some sort of threat on our, on bodily harm or something. But it can also be that we feel nervous, that we feel unsafe, that we feel uncomfortable. When all of that starts to happen, our brain starts to put resources towards all of those things. But whenever we're at positive, our brains don't have to divide our attention through all that, and we can focus on the work. There's a neuroscience study that says that emotional events, things tied to emotion. And of course, we're talking about emotions like joy, happiness, laughter. It could even be sorrow, pain, frustration, sadness, any of that stuff. Whenever it's tied to emotions, these emotional events often attain a privileged status in memory. It's almost like taking these memories and moving them to the top of the stack. Of all of these memories, the ones that you're going to be able to pull right off the top of the stack easiest are the ones that are tied to emotions. And then there's this one. I really love this. This is from the National Institute of Play. And this is based on several long-term studies that they've been monitoring. And it says, play-based learning with playful teachers heightens overall long-term performance. So think about that for a second. Play-based learning, when we're willing to have a little bit of fun with what we're doing. With playful teachers, this is when the teachers are willing to get in on the act and willing to have some fun with the students. And that it heightens overall long-term performance. And we're not talking about just little specifics here. This is across the board. This is some really powerful stuff. And so when we look at this body of research, we start to see the importance of engaging students and really playing on that attention. Now, when we talk about student engagement, the great thing about it is that a lot of times it doesn't take money. It doesn't take financial resources to be able to do this. And a lot of times it doesn't even take maybe our most precious resource in the classroom, time. A lot of times it doesn't even take a whole lot of time. Sometimes it just takes a small shift. Sometimes if we can put a little small adjustment into the experience that students have, that can make all the difference in the world. And I like to talk about that as looking at learning through an engaging lens. We can have an assignment or an activity that we want to do, but if we can look at it through an engaging lens, sometimes that makes all the difference in the world. Let me give you an example. And so a lot of times these days, with all the technology we have in classes, we ask students to respond to things recording short videos. We ask them a question, we give them a prompt, and we say, hey, record your thoughts on video. And a lot of times, we'll use a tool like Flipgrid, or we'll use a tool like Screencastify or Loom, one of those screen recording tools. And what happens is the students take the question, they look straight at the camera, and then they just answer the question. But what if we took an activity like that and we looked at it through an engaging lens, through a unique lens? What if students acted as if they were someone else? So for instance, what if instead of recalling facts from something that happened in history, what if the student recorded that video as if they were a news reporter? Maybe like an anchorman or an anchorwoman on the nightly news, recalling the facts as they happened. Or what if they acted as if they were out on the scenes, like an on-the-scenes TV reporter, recording what had happened right there on the scenes, maybe even doing some interviews? What if you looked at it like a reality game show? Something like the Cash Cab show, where people get into the cab and they don't realize that the game show host is the driver, and he asks questions. If they can answer enough questions by the time they get to their destination, then they earn some cash. What if students recalled facts like that? Or even pretending like they were in the place that they're talking about, seeing things unfold as if, almost in the way that they did in the movie, The Blair Witch Project. Do you remember this one? It was that low budget horror movie that was shot like it was on a wobbly camcorder. And which kind of paved the way for these mockumentary style shows that we've got these days, like The Office and Parks and Rec. What if students recorded their, what they had learned? They're showing what they've learned through a video like that. See, something like that, it's just a small shift. It's a different way to do the video, but it can change the experience that students have completely. That word experience, that's a big one that we're going to be focusing on through this entire video series. And so in this series, we're going to be talking about ways that we can use that technology that we've got in our classroom to help students have a memorable experience, hopefully remember things for the long time, and put some joy into the classroom. I'm super excited about this. Let's dive into this topic.